Claudia and Chip fell in love in their golden years, surrounded by children and grandchildren. But on the night of Saturday, April 13th, 2013, their 17 years of married bliss came to a brutal end, stabbed to death inside their Davis, California home. And that is a true story, and that is the true story behind 48 Hours' newest podcast series, 15 Inside the Daniel Marsh Murders. Today, I'm joined by Erin Moriarty, 48 Hours podcast host. Welcome to Unscripted, Erin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maddie. I really appreciate talking about this podcast because it's one of those cases that really is hard to get out of your head.
Oh my gosh. I've listened to the first 3 episodes as they've dropped, and it's just getting more chilling by the moment. So can we just, I kind of gave a quick synopsis, but from your point of view, you know, what all does this story entail?
Well, I do want to point out that the reason why we called it 15 Inside the Daniel Marsh Murders is I want to remind people all the way through this, he was 15. You have this wonderful couple. They got married later in life. They have these blended families. Life is good. And then one Sunday morning, they don't show up at church and they are found murdered, and murdered in the most awful way. But there was no DNA, no fingerprints. It looked like the perfect murder. Investigators then thought, because it was so brutal, it had to be someone who knew them. So they take this grieving family and they investigate them. So that's a very, very important part of this case. And then finally, 2 months later, they get a call from a young man who says, I know who did this. And they get him in, and he talks about his friend who had confessed. And then they bring in the killer, Daniel Marsh. And what is really probably the most interesting part of the entire podcast is this amazing interrogation that the FBI special agent Chris Campion did. One of the best I'd ever heard or seen, where he got this young man who denied, finally admitting it, and then admitting that he had planned to kill other people. So it's, and then of course this case goes on because California changes its law, and there are opportunities for Daniel Marsh to possibly get out. And so we follow that. And it's one of those stories that's hard to get out of your head.
Yeah. And speaking of those stories, you know, you've been covering, you know, true crime murder cases, the ugliness in the world for over 3 decades. So a murder as senseless and bewildering as this, you know, did this have an effect on how you went about reporting on it and speaking to your interview subjects?
Well, it did, in the sense that this is a highly unusual killer. Most of the time, anyone who watches 48 Hours, we know that even though it doesn't make sense, but people kill from jealousy or to get out of a marriage or out of anger. This was a killer who killed for the thrill of it, and he was so young. So yes, that opened my eyes to what he's been diagnosed as a psychopath. And so I'm taking a look at an area of medicine I had never really thought about. And according to the doctors who meet someone like this, you know, he doesn't have the same kind of feelings that we do. He doesn't have the empathy. He doesn't care about people. So that raises important questions. What do we do with young people like that? Science and research shows that most young offenders can be rehabilitated. But what do you do with someone who's a psychopath who, you know, may never be capable of caring about victims? That's what is raised in a case like this.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I believe it was episode 3, his journal had Jeffrey Dahmer mentioned, Ted Bundy, kind of these prolific, if you will, kind of superstar murderers. And it's just like, how do you rehabilitate someone like that? Now, Erin, I'm curious, out of all the cases you've covered, is there still a case that kind of haunts you or sticks with you, kind of keeps you up at night?
Well, the case that keeps me up at night is one that we also did a podcast. You could still, you know, it's the case of Crosley Green, because we have worked on that case, and most of the evidence seems to indicate that this is an innocent man spending time in prison. He was out for 2 years and he's back in. And so as a reporter, you keep thinking, did I do enough? Did I report this story enough? Was there something out there we missed? So, yes, when you've been doing these stories as long as I have, there are cases that haunt you and make you question whether you did enough as a reporter. You just keep trying to do the best you can.
Yeah. And speaking of, when did true crime, maybe this beat, if you will, or this world of journalism, when did it become really your passion? When did you really dive into it?
Well, I actually have the answer to that. So I was covering the O.J. Simpson case,
Oh.
in the mid 90s. And that's when DNA really became, that was the first time it was introduced in a high profile case. And by the use of DNA, we started realizing that we had thought that the jury system was pretty great and very few people were wrongfully convicted. DNA is showing that there were far greater numbers than we realized of wrongfully convicted people. So I decided to delve into that. And I wanted to do the cases where there weren't DNA, because if there was DNA, in some cases, there were more cases of people wrongfully convicted where there was no DNA to save them. And so that became a passion, because I realized how many of these cases and how many of the similar reasons would lead to wrongful convictions. So I kind of fell into it, but it certainly has been my passion and continues to be my passion.
Yeah. And as I told you before the interview, I am obsessed with true crime. My husband and I, we watch it at dinner. I listen to it in the morning when I'm getting ready at 3:30, like a creep. But, it's so compelling. So for some young journalists that could be watching this, what advice do you have to give them about getting into kind of the true crime realm of journalism and pursuing this?
Well, I would recommend getting a law degree. I have a law degree, and that certainly helps if you're going to be in the courtroom all the time. But short of that, knowing as much, learning as much as you can about the law, caring about the victims first, because I think what makes these stories so compelling is the legal system understandably focuses on the defendant. It's about the defendant's trial and the defendant's rights. And rarely, maybe at the trial, the victim is mentioned, but it's usually the state versus that defendant. And so focusing on the impact of crime on families and on the community is really important. Caring about people. I mean, honestly, anybody who has a love of people and really cares about facts and getting to the bottom of things, that person is made for true crime.
Yeah. Okay. And the best way to keep up with you, Erin Moriarty, and 48 Hours, what is the best way to do that?
Well, for podcasts, you can find us on Apple Podcasts or any place where you get your podcasts. Of course, we're CBS News, we're Paramount Plus, we're on YouTube. I'm probably missing things. There's Fast Channel. 48 Hours is truly multi-platform. We appear a lot of places. So we're on Saturday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, but we're also on so many places, Paramount Plus and Pluto and YouTube, that you can just about find us anywhere.
Just type in that 48 Hours. And specifically this case, it is 15 inside the Daniel Marsh Murders. You can stream the first 3 episodes now, and then the following 3 episodes drop the weeks after that. So, Erin, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your coverage on this case.
Thanks so much, Maddie. It was great talking to you.
You as well.